What if I told you that a poor boy from a small city in Colombia would one day become one of the richest and most feared criminals in history? A child who grew up in a simple family would build an empire worth billions of dollars and become one of the most powerful men on earth. He had money, power, and influence beyond imagination, yet his life ended in tragedy. How did an ordinary boy become the world's most infamous drug king? This is the unbelievable and shocking story of Pablo Escobar. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Universal English. Today, we bring you one of the most fascinating and controversial stories in modern history. It is the story of ambition, power, greed, and the choices that can change a person's destiny forever. His name was Pablo Escobar. Some people saw him as a hero because he helped poor communities. Others saw him as one of the most dangerous criminals the world has ever known. Even decades after his death, the world still talks about his life. But his journey to power was filled with violence, risk, and tragedy. This is the unbelievable story of Pablo Escobar, the man who became the king of cocaine. A boy from Colombia. Our story begins on December 1st, 1949. In a city called Rio Negro, Colombia, a baby boy was born. His name was Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria. His father was a farmer, and his mother was a school teacher. The family was not rich. They lived a simple life and often struggled financially. As a child, Pablo was intelligent and ambitious. But he had one dream that would change everything. He wanted to become rich. Very rich. He did not want an ordinary life. He wanted power and success. From a very young age, he believed that money could solve every problem. The young dreamer. As Pablo grew older, he became known for his confidence. He often told his friends that one day he would become a millionaire. Many people laughed at him. After all, he came from a poor family. How could a poor boy become rich? But Pablo never stopped believing in himself. He was willing to do almost anything to achieve his dream. At school, he was not interested in becoming a doctor or a teacher. He wanted wealth and influence. He wanted people to know his name. Unfortunately, his desire for money would lead him down a dangerous path, entering the world of crime. As a teenager, Pablo became involved in small criminal activities. He sold stolen goods and participated in illegal businesses. At first, these crimes seemed small. But with every success, he became more confident. He discovered something important. Crime brought money, and money brought power. Soon, he wanted more. Much more. He believed that rules were obstacles standing in the way of his dreams. This way of thinking would eventually make him one of the most dangerous men in history. The beginning of an empire. In the 1970s, a new illegal business began growing in South America. It involved a dangerous drug called cocaine. At that time, the demand for cocaine in the United States was increasing rapidly. Pablo saw an opportunity. He realized that this business could make him incredibly rich. He entered the cocaine trade and quickly became successful. Unlike others, Pablo was fearless. He took risks that most people would never take. And those risks made him powerful. Very powerful. Within a few years, he was earning millions of dollars. The birth of the Medellin cartel. Pablo eventually helped create one of the most powerful criminal organizations in history. It became known as the Medellin cartel. The cartel controlled a huge part of the global cocaine trade. Its operations stretched across many countries. Money began pouring in. Millions became billions. Pablo's wealth grew so quickly that even he could hardly count it. At one point, he was considered one of the richest people in the world. His empire seemed unstoppable. But with great wealth came great danger. And Pablo was making enemies everywhere. A life of luxury. As his fortune increased, Pablo lived an extraordinary life. He bought expensive houses, luxury cars, private airplanes, huge estates. He even built a giant property called Hacienda Napoles. The estate included lakes, gardens, and exotic animals. His life looked like a dream. But behind the luxury was a dark reality. Violence, fear, and constant danger. The man who wanted everything was beginning to lose control of his own life. The poor boy from Colombia had achieved his dream of becoming rich. But his hunger for power was only growing stronger. The empire he built would soon make him one of the most feared men on earth. In Part 2, we will discover how Pablo Escobar became the king of cocaine and how his power changed an entire country. Becoming the king of cocaine. By the late 1970s, Pablo Escobar was no longer a small-time criminal. He had become one of the most powerful men in the illegal drug trade. His organization, known as the Medellin Cartel, was growing at an unbelievable speed. Every day, huge amounts of cocaine were being transported from Colombia to different parts of the world. The demand for the drug was enormous. And wherever there was demand, Pablo saw an opportunity. Soon, his business was earning millions of dollars every single day. The amount of money was almost impossible to imagine. Pablo had achieved the dream he had as a child. He had become incredibly rich. But wealth was not enough. Now he wanted something even more dangerous. He wanted power and respect, living like a king. As his fortune grew, Pablo began living an extraordinary life. He bought luxurious houses and expensive cars. He owned private airplanes and helicopters. He purchased huge pieces of land all over Colombia. One of his most famous properties was Hacienda Napoles. It was more than just a house. It was like a private kingdom. The estate included lakes, gardens, swimming pools, and even a zoo filled with exotic animals from different parts of the world. Visitors could hardly believe what they saw. Pablo's wealth seemed endless. Some stories even claimed that he spent thousands of dollars every month just to keep his cash safe. At one point, he became one of the richest people on earth. The poor boy who once dreamed of becoming a millionaire had become a billionaire. But with great wealth came even greater dangers. The man of two faces. Pablo Escobar had two very different sides. On one side, he was feared. On the other, he was admired. He often helped poor communities in Colombia. He paid for houses. He built football fields. He donated money to families who had nothing. Many poor people saw him as a hero. Some even called him Robin Hood. They believed he cared about ordinary people. Whenever he visited certain neighborhoods, people welcomed him warmly. Children ran to greet him. Families thanked him for his help. But there was another side to Pablo. A much darker side. Anyone who stood in his way became his enemy. And his enemies often lived in fear. This combination of generosity and violence made him one of the most controversial figures in history. Some people loved him. Others were terrified of him. The dream of politics. Although Pablo had money, he wanted something more. He wanted respect. He wanted to be accepted by society. And so he entered politics. In the early 1980s, he became involved in government activities and even gained a position as an alternate member of Colombia's Congress. For a moment, it seemed that he had achieved everything. He had wealth. He had fame. And now he had political influence. But his secret life could not remain hidden forever. Journalists and political leaders started investigating him. They discovered his connections to the drug trade. Newspapers began exposing the truth. Soon, his political career collapsed. Pablo felt humiliated. He believed that powerful people had destroyed his dream. And he never forgot those who had exposed him. A country in fear. As the years passed, Pablo became even more powerful. But governments in Colombia and other countries were determined to stop him. Pablo refused to surrender. Instead, he fought back. The country entered one of the darkest periods in its history. Violence spread everywhere. Bombs exploded in cities. Police officers lived in fear. Judges and politicians faced constant danger. Ordinary people suffered because of the conflict. Many families lost loved ones. Many lives were changed forever. The world watched as Colombia struggled with violence and uncertainty. Pablo Escobar had become one of the most wanted men on earth. Yet he remained incredibly powerful. Silver or lead? Pablo had a famous saying. Silver or lead? It meant something simple but frightening. Take the money or face terrible consequences. Many people accepted his money. Others refused and suffered because of their decision. This strategy helped Pablo build a powerful network of supporters. Fear became one of his strongest weapons. Many people were afraid to challenge him. At the height of his power, he seemed unstoppable. He had money. He had influence. And he had people willing to protect him. Some believe that nobody could ever defeat him. But history teaches us an important lesson. No empire lasts forever. One of the richest men in history. Pablo's wealth became legendary. Some reports claim that his organization earned billions of dollars every year. The amount of money was so great that it created unusual problems. There was simply too much cash. Some of it was hidden in buildings. Some was buried underground. Some was stored in warehouses. Stories even claimed that millions of dollars were lost because rats damaged the hidden money. It sounded unbelievable. But that was the kind of wealth Pablo possessed. At one point, magazines listed him among the richest people in the world. The boy who had once dreamed of escaping poverty had achieved something almost unimaginable. Yet despite all his wealth, he could not buy peace. He could not buy trust. And he could not escape the consequences of his choices. The world turns against him. The violence in Colombia shocked the entire world. Governments increased their efforts to stop Pablo Escobar. Special police units were created. International agencies joined the search. The pressure on him became greater and greater. Friends became enemies. Some of his closest allies disappeared. Others decided to cooperate with the authorities. For the first time in many years, Pablo realized that his empire was no longer secure. The king of cocaine was beginning to lose control. The man who once seemed untouchable now had enemies everywhere. He could no longer trust everyone around him. And he knew that danger was getting closer. A prison unlike any other. Eventually, Pablo agreed to surrender to the authorities. But he made an unusual demand. He wanted to build his own prison. It sounded impossible. Yet the government accepted the agreement. The prison became known as La Catedral. It was unlike any prison the world had ever seen. It had comfortable rooms and special facilities. Some people even joked that it looked more like a luxury hotel than a prison. Even while living there, Pablo continued influencing parts of his organization. He still had power. He still had connections. But this strange situation could not last forever. Eventually, the government decided to move him to a real prison. When Pablo learned about the plan, he escaped. And once again, he became the most wanted man in Colombia. The beginning of the end. After his escape, one of the largest manhunts in history began. Thousands of police officers searched for him. Special units worked day and night. The man who once controlled a huge empire was now hiding from place to place. He could no longer live openly. He could no longer trust many people. The empire that had once made him one of the richest men in the world was slowly falling apart. For the first time in years, Pablo Escobar was running out of options. The king who had everything was beginning to lose everything. And the final chapter of his life was about to begin. Pablo Escobar had built an empire of unimaginable wealth and power. He had become one of the richest and most feared men in history. But his rise had created countless enemies, and his empire was now collapsing around him. The most wanted man in the world. After escaping from La Catedral, Pablo Escobar became one of the most wanted men on earth. The Colombian government launched a massive manhunt. Special police units searched for him day and night. International agencies also joined the hunt. Helicopters flew over cities. Roads were blocked. Houses were searched. Everywhere Pablo looked, danger seemed to be waiting for him. The man who once traveled in luxury and power was now living in hiding. He moved from one safe house to another. He changed locations constantly. He trusted very few people. The king of cocaine had become a fugitive. For the first time in many years, fear had entered his life. A lonely empire. As the months passed, Pablo's empire continued to fall apart. Many of his closest allies were arrested. Others surrendered. Some decided to leave the criminal world forever. The organization that had once seemed unstoppable was now weak and divided. Pablo's money could no longer solve every problem. His power was disappearing. Even worse, he was becoming increasingly isolated. The man who had once been surrounded by thousands of supporters now had only a few trusted companions. He spent most of his days hiding inside small houses and secret locations. He missed his family. He missed his old life. He missed the days when he felt powerful. But those days were gone. The empire he had spent years building was slowly collapsing. A father in hiding. Despite everything, one thing remained important to Pablo: his family. He loved his wife and children deeply. During his time in hiding, he often worried about their safety. He wanted to protect them from danger. Many stories describe him as a man who, despite his criminal life, cared deeply for his family. Sometimes he risked his own safety simply to communicate with them. But every phone call created danger. Every message increased the chance of being discovered. Yet Pablo could not stay away. He missed his children and wanted to hear their voices. Those moments of love would eventually play an important role in his final days. The search gets closer. The search for Pablo became more intense with every passing week. Special teams studied his habits. They followed clues. They listened for mistakes. The authorities believed that sooner or later, Pablo would contact his family. And they were right. Little by little, the search teams began getting closer. Pablo could feel the pressure. He knew that his time was running out. He knew that the world around him was changing. The man who once seemed untouchable was now running out of places to hide. The final day. On December 2nd, 1993, one day after his 44th birthday, everything changed. Pablo was hiding in a house in Medellin, Colombia. He made a phone call to his family. The conversation lasted long enough for authorities to trace his location. Soon, police forces surrounded the area. Pablo realized that they had found him. He tried to escape. He ran across the rooftops of nearby houses. Then, moments later, the chase came to an end. Pablo Escobar died that day. The man who had once controlled a criminal empire worth billions of dollars was gone. The search that had lasted for years was finally over. The king of cocaine had fallen. A nation reacts. News of Pablo's death spread around the world. Many people celebrated. They believed that a dark chapter in Colombia's history had ended. For them, Pablo represented fear and violence. Others reacted differently. Some of the poor people he had helped mourned his death. They remembered the houses he had built and the money he had given to struggling families. Thousands of people attended his funeral. The reactions showed just how complicated his story was. To some, he was a criminal. To others, he was a benefactor. But everyone agreed on one thing. Pablo Escobar had changed Colombia forever. The price of power. Pablo spent his entire life chasing money and power. And for a time, he achieved both. He became one of the richest men in history. He lived in luxury beyond imagination. People around the world knew his name. But what was the price? He spent his final years hiding. He lost many friends and allies. He lived with fear and constant danger. His empire collapsed. And his life ended at the age of 44. His story reminds us that success built on harmful choices often comes with painful consequences. Money can buy many things, but it cannot buy peace. It cannot buy trust. And it cannot change the past. The legacy of Pablo Escobar. Even decades after his death, people continue to talk about Pablo Escobar. Books have been written about him. Documentaries have explored his life. Movies and television series have retold his story. Many people remain fascinated by the dramatic rise and fall of the man who became the king of cocaine. But his legacy is complicated. Some remember the wealth. Others remember the violence. Some remember the homes he built. Others remember the suffering caused during his era. History often remembers people not only for their achievements, but also for the consequences of their actions. And Pablo Escobar's story is a powerful example of that truth. Lessons from his story. What can we learn from the life of Pablo Escobar? First, ambition itself is not bad. Dreaming of success is not wrong. Wanting a better life is natural. But the path we choose matters. The choices we make shape our future. Pablo wanted wealth and power more than anything else. And for a time, he achieved his dreams. But the methods he chose brought pain, fear, and tragedy. His story teaches us that success without values can become destructive. True success is not measured only by money. It is measured by character, integrity, and the positive impact we leave on others. The story of Pablo Escobar is one of the most extraordinary and tragic stories of modern history. A poor boy from Colombia became one of the richest and most powerful men in the world. He built an empire that seemed unstoppable. Yet in the end, he lost everything. His life reminds us that every decision has consequences. Power can disappear. Money can vanish. Fame can fade. But our choices and our actions leave a lasting mark on the world. Thank you for watching this incredible biography on Universal English. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Keep learning, keep improving your English, and join us again for another inspiring biography. See you in the next video.